Good evening and welcome back to Be Rich. So, this is Prashant Perumal. He is a journalist. He has worked with several leading publications. He's studied journalism at the Columbia University. And we thought we will do a series of podcasts. And he's joined our organization. So, we thought we'll do a series of podcasts in English. And he will also do some of this in Tamil. Not possible to translate everything into Tamil, but on and off we will do something in Tamil. But for both of us, primarily our language of communication is English, so most of this will be in English. So we will do a series and see how it goes for a year before we take a call. There will be a lot of subjects. You can also write down the subjects. And of course, I had another channel which I started with Vinod, which I didn't take off much because after one book I lost, I didn't have the time. He will combine with Vinod, and we will also do a book series. Anyway, so let's start with as usual because he has some questions on gold which have never been asked. Because most of us are interested in what is the price of gold, but he wanted to go into the history of gold, history of currency, and how it affects monetary policy. So, without much ado, we will talk about
Go.
gold today.
Hi everyone.
Yeah, you
Nice to be
start.
chatting with you.
Yes.
Yeah, so you are known as I would look at you as the gold bug of India, the most popular gold bug. Like there are a lot of gold bugs in the US and across the world. So I have a lot of questions, kind of playing devil's advocate on you.
Mm.
So you're a big fan of Warren Buffett and Charlie
Yes,
Munger, as we
yes,
know. And
yes.
the most popular quote on gold that comes from Buffett is that, Buffett says that, if I own land or a farmland or let's say a stock of a company, these are assets that are going to get me money. They're going to generate cash flow over the years. So, so it makes sense for me to buy it. That's what Buffett says, because I know how much cash I'm most likely going to be getting from these assets. So I can value them, right? And I can decide what price to pay them, whether I'm overpaying or underpaying. So Buffett's never been a great proponent, a supporter of gold. But you take, in India, you advocate gold
Buying of
possession. So
gold,
what
yeah.
is the reason that you take another?
First, let me say that I'm in complete agreement with Buffett that gold has no use, gold will generate no cash flow.
Mm.
Now, having said that, I am not in America, I am not in a
Mm.
free world. We live in a country where there are a lot of restrictions
Mm.
and a lot of limited banking. Nearly 90% of India does not have access to banking. We have now what is you have opened a bank account with Aadhaar, but that's not a banking. Banking is primarily banks willing to lend. You few banks always lend money to people who do not require money. And so those who require money will not get any loan from a Indian institution. And since more than 90% of our population is below middle class, because the median income of an Indian is 20,000 rupees, that's the 50th percentile. So there's a lot of money requirement. And for more than 95% of our population, one medical emergency is the difference between absolute poverty and living a middle class life. So gold acts as a hedge in the sense that if you give gold and give you a PAN card, at least 75% of the value is immediately credited into your account. So for in case of emergency, gold acts as currency for people like that. The second, India has a restrictive investment policy. Does not have it is not capital account convertible. So the way to take out money out of India through the liberalized remittance regime is a very complex thing. Now they have slapped a presumptive 5% tax on that. So even I can take up to $250,000.
Mm.
But for the first 10 lakhs, now I pay 5%. On money which is already taxed, I pay extra 5%. And beyond 10 lakhs, I have to pay 20%
Mm.
tax. So I am subjected to tax on money which is white and is in the bank. And again, I have to reclaim it after 1 year.
Mm.
So and even mutual funds which invest in US stocks, US and JAP stocks are now restricted. So India is not capital convertible. It's not money cannot be taken out easily out of India. So we do not have a hedge against the falling rupee. And rupee has been perpetually falling and will fall because the inflation rates between India and America are different. Though the Reserve Bank is now artificially keeping the rupee high by selling dollars in the international markets. But markets, like Viral Acharya said, have a way of paying you back. So Buffett lives in America in a world where fully capital can move freely and all people have access to banking channels where banks are willing to make loans. Here, to a person who is in rural India, banks are not willing to make loans. Therefore, for an emergency money, for them, there is a storehouse of value required. Gold represents the only opportunity where a storehouse of value can be created and can be accessed immediately when cash is required.
So what would you say to someone like who says that most of our savings in India are, like into land and gold and things like that, and people aren't really, exploring other avenues. So I can understand gold. You saying that gold is definitely better than holding your wealth in rupee because obviously because of inflation. And you want to hold gold, yeah, but you can't really look at like gold as an investment like equities that can actually build your wealth. So what portion of let's say an average Indians allocation, I mean wealth, should be in gold? Because it's not going to compound your wealth great at the long run, but it's
It
going
will
to protect.
compound. The last 25 years, gold has beaten Indian indices.
Yeah.
So I don't agree that gold will not compound.
But in the longer run,
In the longer run, 25 years is a long term.
not necessarily.
Okay, for individuals like
Okay, we'll get into that in the next questions. But yeah.
25 years is a long term. But what I suggest to people is when they started, when gold was at 3,000 rupees a gram of gold, they should go to at least 400 grams of gold. When it crossed 6,000, 7,000, I cut it back to 200 grams of gold.
Okay.
Being that if you have 400 grams of gold, that means you have 40 lakhs. So in an emergency, you can take 30, 32 lakhs, which will mean that, which also one of the other mantras I have is buying adequate health insurance. So a combination of health insurance and gold will mean that you can live for 5-6 years while you figure out what to do with life. That's all I do. The idea is gold gives you easy access to cash over a period of time and allows you to mull options in life when you are in trouble. As far as equity is concerned, to the 90% of the population, I say you just invest in an index fund and forget it. And I said don't go anywhere near an active mutual fund or small cap or mid cap stocks because you do not know whether the balance sheet you have printed is what is true. In case of Satyam and other big companies, Mehtas and Satyam have shown even the biggest of auditors can be fooled. So it is not a game for small and medium term investors. Because I talk to very small investors, retail investors, they should not be playing the stock market. If they want exposure to equity, they should look at the index fund and buy large cap stocks if they want to. In the top 100 stocks in the country and invest in that, the chances of you losing are far lesser.
Since we're talking about gold and the valuation of gold, I mean, any asset, if you're going to, even if it's the best companies, if it's the best equity companies, if you're going to overpay for it, right? If you're going to pay much more than what it is actually the fundamental value of the company, you're going to have suffer lower returns. But with gold, particularly when Buffett talks about gold, he says that he can't value gold. So the whole question is like, how do you value gold? What do you know? How do you know that it's the intrinsic value of gold is this, and you say that it's lower. I mean, it's much higher than the current price, so I'm going to buy it.
I agree very clearly with Buffett.
Yeah.
that you cannot value gold
Mm.
precisely as what you can value an equity or a
Yeah.
bond asset.
Yeah.
But what happens again, we are looking from a third world country perspective.
Mm.
So if you look at 25 years of Indian history, the rupee has always depreciated by 3 to 4%.
Mm.
So you know for sure gold will appreciate by 4% because gold is not available in India and has to be bought from abroad. Gold also has a tie up with a monetary policy, tied up to monetary policy. Gold and dollar are linked to link, whether
Yeah.
you like it or not. So whenever the US runs a loose monetary policy, gold has really gone well. So in the last from the Greenspan put of 2000 2001 till today, gold has had an uninterrupted run, except for one brief period when it dropped from 1800 to 1100
Mm.
and it caught up immediately. So the valuation of gold will be looking at geopolitics and the US monetary policy. US monetary policy has been loose and started to become tight only in 2024.
Mm.
Normally, gold should have corrected in 2024. It did not correct because of a geopolitical problem.
Mm.
The US is the reserve currency of the world. And since US is the reserve currency of the world, it was assumed that people could transact with US at all times. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the US blocked 30% of Russian reserves in US, which meant central banks whose governments did not have a good relationship with America could not trust
Mm.
gold. So what happened was China, Turkey, Russia have authoritarian governments. And in case of Turkey, an elected authoritarian government, and so is in the case of Russia, an elected authoritarian government. These ideologically clash with the American values, which are liberal. How much ever you may despise Trump, you should understand that Trump is just carrying forward the policies of Joe Biden.
Mm.
Joe Biden did the CHIPS Act, bringing manufacturing back to US. He introduced punitive taxes on China. But Trump has taken this all to another level, which has made it very difficult. But US has a coherent policy and is a liberal democracy with institutions. Trump cannot last more
Rule
than
of law. Yeah.
rule of law.
Rule of law.
Trump cannot last more than 4 years. And by the time the 2026 November comes, the House of Representatives hopefully would flip,
Mm.
making him a lame duck president. So what I'm trying to tell you is there are checks and balances, and there's a US and a Western system, which may be temporarily clouded, and there is an authoritarian system.
Mm.
When this is the geopolitics, where an authoritarian system clashes with a liberal system.
Mm.
While America was the lone superpower in 2001, China has accumulated enough
Mm.
economic strength to challenge the US economic might. Therefore, what they are now doing, Russia, China, and other countries have started acquiring gold as an alternate to US dollars because they don't want to be holding dollars. And tomorrow, when there is a conflict between US and China, US can hold back on the
Mm.
US dollars. So to diversify assets, they do not trust the euro, and their own citizens do not trust the yuan. There is a difference in price of Bitcoin in
Mm.
China and America because the Chinese buy Bitcoin here, transfer the wealth
Yeah, that's the
abroad,
geopolitics. But I'm saying all this is true. I know that
and
all the fear.
therefore,
Yeah. Mm.
therefore, when gold should have been falling, China, Russia, Turkey, India, Poland have been buying gold at whatever price
Mm.
to provide a platform. Now the American president himself is calling for cuts in interest rates.
Mm.
So if the American interest rates fall next year, it will be positive for gold. So there will be two actions at play that the central banks are buying gold as well as the public will buy gold. If there was no geopolitical tension, gold wouldn't have rallied from 2000 to 3600 or 3300 now. Gold would have been at 1900. But the effect of China and Russia has made gold move from 1900 to 3300.
I also have a fun fact about currencies.
Yeah, this is very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I found out that